Good afternoon everyone and welcome to this afternoon's oral evidence session of the Welsh Affairs Select Committee. My name's Ruth Jones and I'm the chair of this committee. And our session today is the final session on promoting Wales for inward investment, and I do want to thank Minister Stockwood and Tim Newns for joining us today from the Department of Business and Trade. It's great to have you with us, gentlemen. Thank you. Before I begin, can I ask any members to declare any relevant interests? No, none at all. Okay. In that case, let me move on and let me start. I don't know, Minister, would you like to open, with a very brief introductory of how you fit in the DBT structure, and then Tim Newns maybe afterwards, and then we'll go on to the question.
Yeah, happy to. Yeah. So good afternoon, everyone. So I've been in post 6 months. So the Office for Investment is really the government's ministry for ensuring that our industrial strategy is funded. That's the primary role, but there are some secondary roles as well, which is really, it sits between both Department of Business and Trade and also the Treasury. So part of the role is to make sure there's the voice of business within the Treasury as well. So someone that's had a 30-year career in business, I'm glad to do that. And then the third part is really acting as an interface with legislation for businesses as well. So people trying to invest in the UK or people trying to expand in the UK, we try and make sure that we're an interface with those businesses as well. But the primary role is to represent the UK's interests with investors.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Mr. Newns, do you want to outline your role?
Thank you, Chair. So Tim Newns, I'm one of the directors in the Office for Investment. I've been there for just over 3 years, and I, as well as being part of the Major Deals Unit in the OFI, also oversee our Place team and our Strategic Opportunities team as well.
Brilliant, thank you very much. So let me ask you, obviously this is the Welsh Affairs Select Committee, so let me ask you, Lord Stockwood, what are the Office for Investment's priorities in Wales?
So if I step back from that, actually, the priorities overall are concurrent across the whole of the UK, and then we can talk specifically about Wales for the purposes of this conversation. So what we try and do is we look at where the industrial strategy for the next sort of 10 years that we have has 8 key growth sectors. And our role as an organisation is to try and ensure that those strategies are very clear and they're investable. So specifically, the 8 core growth sectors isn't within doesn't mean within exception to other industries, but those are the 8 core growth sectors where we've got comparative advantage internationally as well. So alongside making sure that we have those plans specific for each region of the UK, and whether that's working with combined authorities, or the Welsh Government itself, we try and make sure that we are, as a team, we work in collaboration to understand that there are investable opportunities that we can then go match to capital globally or nationally, quite frankly, through the pension funds as well. So specifically for Wales, we're trying to build on the growth capabilities already, whether that's in the creative sectors, whether that's in what we're seeing in the semiconductors down in the south, or whether we're looking at the opportunities in the new AI industrial zone in the north as well. We're trying to make sure that both the industries of the past are secured and retained, and that we've got the right sort of insight and capacity there, but also make sure that we're looking internationally for further growth opportunities. So in Wales, I would say those are the main things we're doing today, is looking through the AI growth zone in the north, whether we're looking at the semiconductor through the investment that Tim can talk to, that we help secure in the south, in your constituency, I believe, or whether it is looking, where I was in Wrexham a couple of weeks ago, the myriad of opportunities that are there with Andrew, just making sure that we're supportive as well. So it's both proactive in terms of working with local parties, but it's also reactive in terms of we take instruction from local MPs or from members of Parliament to ensure that those strategies are well supported and built out so they're investable.
And you've identified those priorities. How do you actually measure? Because priorities are great and growth zones are great, but how do you measure specific progress against those priorities?
So for us, the OFI has its own metrics. So we take instruction for the industrial strategy reports quarterly in terms of the growth objectives, in terms of foreign direct investment, in terms of how projects are being delivered, and then we have our own capacity as well, where we look at we call them hunt lists, which is trying to make sure that we're proactively out in the market, looking for businesses, investors that can support this work as well. So the industrial strategies delivery is the main way that we're measured, but then internally we also look at the sort of the lists of businesses and investors globally that we're in track to make sure we've got a strong pipeline for the whole of the UK as well.
Brilliant, thank you very much. And obviously the priorities you're talking about now, how about over the last 5 years? And I appreciate it may be difficult for you to talk about the last 5 years, but how have those priorities changed over the last 5 years?
Well, I mean, coming into the OFI 6 months ago, I mean, one of my personal reasons for coming into government and taking my earning potential down to zero from what it was 7 months ago was that the agenda that the government's got around the industrial strategy, I firmly believe is the right one, but it's what that is in service of is more important. And so for me, coming from the northeast, from Grimsby in particular, from a post-industrial town, we've got to make sure that the story of growth in the UK, whether we're talking about the industrial strategy, the infrastructure, makes sense to people and impacts people's day-to-day lives as well. And I think that's the difference that I've witnessed. So there's a really clear articulation now, an understanding that we're starting to make sure it's pervasive to the organisation, that the growth agenda for the main economy, I believe, is on track. Inflation's at the right sort of target. Cost of living should come down in the next 12 months, but that's the real reason we're doing this, is to ensure that there's a real focus on the regions of the UK and making sure that this has both real effect in people's life but political expediency as well. So I can't talk for the last 5 years, but I can say in the last 6 months there's a real understanding that this has got to connect to day-to-day people's lives rather than being at this aggregate macro level around inflation, around interest rates, which are important, but actually connecting that and making sure that all the regions are well served is a high priority, certainly for the OFI and certainly for the government, I'd suggest.
Well, thank you. Tim, did you want to come in there?
I was just going to say, I suppose that there's been a number of policy interventions as well over that time. So as we've obviously seen throughout Wales as well, in terms of the free ports, the investment zones, a number of policies that are distinctly to increase the attractiveness for potential investors on a very geographical basis or a very place-focused basis. I think over the last 12 months as well, we've seen an expansion of the OFI, which is again, previously in its initial incarnation, the OFI was very focused on the really big deals. And there's still an element of that, certainly, but it is now a sort of broader investment promotion agency for the UK, if you like. And we've put quite a lot of care and attention into the structure of that to make sure that firstly, that place or nations and regions, if you like, are a common theme right throughout that, irrelevant of which team it is, whether it's the capital formation team, whether it's the strategic investment opportunities team. So that's been a critical part of that, and indeed it's one of the sort of big bets, as we call them, across the Department for Business and Trade more generally as well, one of the 6 priorities for the department. So I think we've seen we've seen a combination of factors from policy to delivery, and then also I think at a more macro level, more of a focus on particularly high value transformational investment as well. It's sort of where is the UK government's most definitive intervention, essentially, I suppose. And I think that's where we've seen, particularly in Wales actually, with a number of the large projects like sort of Shotton Mill, and obviously we've talked about the semiconductors area in South Wales, your constituency with Vichy, and some of those really key investors, both in terms of the volume of capital and jobs that they're bringing, but also the impact on those supply chains and overall growth.
Thank you very much. Let me bring in Andrew Ranger, please.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you both for coming to see us today. And good to see you again, Lord Stockwood. You've actually already touched on quite a bit of this in answering the Chair's question. So the actual question is, how is the Office for Investment delivering benefits for Wales, and where in Wales are those benefits being felt? So you've touched on this, but if you could go into sort of some more detail, sort of particularly in how, in terms of the delivery, what is that involving? Who is that involving? You've touched on local authorities and things, but in terms of how you work, that'd be useful. Yeah,
I think there's some sort of, maybe I can talk about sort of the sort of bigger levers that we've got to pull, and then the specifics that Tim can come in on. So overall, and I think it's a follow on from the Chair's question as well, is that there are significant investment vehicles now this government's put in place for the whole of the UK, and certainly Wales is going to benefit from this if it's not already, which is, when we look at where there are financial constraints on investment throughout the market, we now have instruments or organisations that can address that, whether that's Innovate UK at the sort of startup end of the scale through the British Business Bank, which is investing in funds to help scale up right to the National Wealth Fund. And then we have GB Energy as well. So there are multiple sources of capital now that we can bring to bear on strategic investments throughout the UK. There are then the sort of structural initiatives, whether it's the AI growth zones that we've already talked about, but it's brilliant to see the first major announcements in North Wales, but also the policies around clean energy as well. So there are obviously initiatives and commitments to the floating offshore wind farms in the Celtic Sea as well. So again, there are structural initiatives as well. So capital exists, the structural initiatives exist, and then importantly, I think our role is to connect inward investment to help accelerate and amplify those capital investments by the government as well, whether that's foreign direct investment. In November, I think it was November or December, I took a group from Oman, the ambassador and the Omani finance minister, down to Cardiff, again just to show them that there are opportunities for investment and different cultural opportunities outside of the southeast of the UK. But it's really important to say, how do we then think about investors, both from the pension funds in the UK or the private equity funds globally or the sovereign wealth funds, to make sure that they're thinking beyond just kind of anodyne structural investments in funds, to show them the communities that this can really impact as well. So I think there's a whole sort of from top to bottom, I think there are a number of initiatives now. And I've been encouraged, it's only 6 months and I'm encouraged by the amount of activity in Wales, certainly relative to other parts of the UK. It seems to be both on a sort of a entrepreneurial activity in communities right through to structural projects like the AI growth zones. It's good to see both working. There's a lot of work to do and it could be better, but it certainly feels like it's been well supported, something to build on.
Yeah, I think, the story of investment in Wales over the last few years is a relatively positive one, actually. We've seen growth in the numbers of investments taking place. We've seen job numbers going up steadily over the last few years. So I think the most recent figures that came out show Wales receiving about 4.7% of the UK's investment share, which is almost equivalent to the sort of population share, if you like, of Wales and the UK. So I think we've got a solid foundation in that respect to build from. And from a delivery perspective, I mentioned some of the larger projects that we've worked on, and the other positive thing I think to look at those projects is that they're quite well spread across Wales as well, both in the north and the south. Probably the mid Wales is one of the more challenging areas, but we've still seen Kernan Structural Steel, for example, going into that area of the country, and one or two others. So I think from our perspective, as the Minister said, we're very much concentrating as the industrial strategy being the ultimate plan that we're working towards, which for Wales is really internationally significant clusters like semiconductors, like aerospace, like some of the life sciences elements as well, both in Cardiff and North Wales. We can really promote those and draw investment into those through the international network. I mentioned the structure of OFI, and one or two of those teams that we've set up specifically on the delivery side to help. As I say, we have a place for a nations and regions team where we have a dedicated Welsh senior partner, investment partner there, Liz, who sat behind me. I'm not allowed to look round apparently, so I know she's there. She's still there.
She's behind me.
But Liz has huge experience in trade and investment, having been involved in trade negotiations, investment, trade for many years. We have, but that is a dedicated position to purely really work with the Welsh system here and make sure both we're delivering for it and that there is the infrastructure here to sort of support us around those projects as well. Strategic Investment and Opportunities team, they are actively working as well right across the UK, so in this part of the country as well, or in Wales, sorry, to uncover the major investment opportunities. So at the Welsh Investment Summit, a number of those big capital opportunities were put forward, which was great for those to come really clearly across, I think. And we were able to bring capital investors into that environment as well and see some of those opportunities. We have a new marketing team. There was no marketing team, dedicated marketing team before, which allows us to be much more on the front foot with the nations and regions element. So I think although we'll still probably continue to lead with sectors, supporting the industrial strategy, place comes through in that sector piece really strongly. So if we're talking about aerospace, we will be talking about Broughton, North Wales. If we're talking about semiconductors, which we will be, we'll very much be talking about Newport and that whole corridor in South Wales. So that's important. We also have a financial services concierge service, which is working with the world's largest financial services companies. Obviously, insurance in particular is a real strength in Wales, so that will become part of it. And then we also have our triage service, which has been really important in finding power connections in particular, as well as looking at planning and skills availability as well to help land investment as well. So a broad range of different units, all of which, you know, are quite tactical really to try and unpick any barrier as we bring investment through the system, if you like, as well as the Minister said, the proactive element that's going out there hunting new as well.
Well, you talk about place and regions, and of course, I think you mentioned local authorities, we've got mayoral authorities and all those kind of things. Is there capacity or ability to be able to bring those together? I'm thinking like where I am in Wrexham, but what's so important for us is that whole northwest England corridor as well, Manchester, Liverpool, same down in south of Cardiff and Bristol, I imagine, and others. So are you able to operate on that scale as well, rather than getting sort of too tied down into place or regions or nations? Is that?
And my personal view is rather presented. One of the things I found interesting about coming into government is that there's a deliverability factor to who you're working with as well, which is obvious statement, but I thought it might be slightly different to the commercial world, which is the regions that are having the most success have a coherent story and a belief that you can deliver the project, so you can put investors in front of them. There's a coherence. I think, when I came to Rector, it was brilliant. We had such a good day that day and it was so enthusing. But I came away from thinking about, who do we speak to directly about projects? There were so many different people from local government, from the national government. Yourself was there were entrepreneurs. And I was like, actually, if we talk to Teesside as an example or Manchester as an example, I know that they're combined authorities rather than nations, but it's really coherent. We go to the mayor has an economic plan, and it helps us prioritise in a range of, opportunities that we have to try and work with finite resources. That was one of the things that we were keen to work more generally with you on, is like, how do we create a more coherent single voice that represents the opportunities, whether that's regionally in Wales or whether it's nationally in Wales is up for the people to decide. But I came away from that day thinking about who are the people that we're going to partner with to deliver these projects specifically. And it doesn't have to be that clear cut all the times, but like when I've thought about the last 4 months, the areas that are doing particularly well have a clarity of delivery and where you can get data from, where you can get information from quickly, who are the decision makers, a clear plan for the region as well that's coherent and maps to a national plan as well. And I was thinking that's one of the things as a team we need to do better, I think, with the Wales team, is to try and help. And by the way, those capabilities are at varying degrees of maturity based on where those devolved powers have been and how long they've been in place. But that was one of the things for me. I was a little confused. Ultimately, we want to get deals done that impact the local communities. That's the first, second and third order of our priorities. But the ability to deliver stuff needs clarity of purpose and also around where decisions can get made as well. I think that's something that maybe we could work together on to make slightly clearer, I would suggest. I don't know, Tim, if that's fair. That's just a personal view coming from those meetings.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that completely. I think we do bring certain regions together over certain initiatives as well. I mean, obviously, with the devolved nations, then they are, dealt with at a national level, if you like. And then in England, there is a couple of initiatives. We've got the Northern Growth Corridor and we've got the Oxcam corridor as well, which again are collective sorts of propositions. But then the way we deal with the sectoral aspect of things as well, with the creative clusters, for example, we'll present them as a collective as well. Yeah. So I think we do sort of bring them together in the right circumstances, I think. But I think the Minister's probably covered everything else.
Oxcam's quite a good example, actually. So there's a new initiative to connect Oxford and Cambridge together, Lord Valence is the champion of it, and it creates a coherence and a narrative that allows us to go out internationally at scale and talk large-scale numbers and an investment proposition in the round. Well, we've got a whole list of tactical opportunities that in themselves are really important at the sort of 10, 20, 30 million pound project level, 200, 300, 400 jobs. But it's when you can go, when people are looking to invest, the sort of people we're talking to often are trying to talk in the billions. And so to get that sort of scale, I think if we can help create a more coherent picture, an investable proposition that we can go out to, A, it's more efficient for all of us, and B, it'll have more impact ultimately on the nation as well.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah.
It just reminded me, actually, we had all the Scottish cities down in London about 2 weeks ago on an investment sort of mission, if you like. And I think, again, there was 2 or 3 initiatives that we could see collectively would work really well across the whole of Scotland. So one of them was a university spin-out vehicle that all of the different cities were very keen on, supporting their key universities. And the other one was around, again, exactly to the Minister's point, really, how do we aggregate some of the smaller investment opportunities that individually wouldn't really get the attention of the major investors. So things like heat networks, for example, which I know obviously there'll be many of those opportunities throughout Wales, but probably only £3-5 million at an individual level. Whereas by bringing those together across regions, we can start to aggregate those to sort of 50 million or 75 million. And that's where then we can start to get interest from some of the big domestic pension funds, some of the international funds, for example. So I think how we can do that, but you do need that coordination resource, which is really important.
Well, thank you very much. And just moving on, are you, as an office, targeting specific markets overseas to promote Wales for investment?
Honest answer is no. So we're talking generally about the UK, and the Wales is a part of that. But we don't go out there and think this trip is specifically for Wales. But we're very glad and super supportive, and very very aware of the opportunities throughout Wales itself. So it's part of a portfolio. But what I would say is, like, if we could work on an investment prospectus specifically, it makes it easier for us when we think about the industrial strategy to think about clusters more than individual destinations. But our role is to represent the whole of the UK, I would suggest.
And so, in the same question, in terms of the UK, are you targeting specific markets?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so definitely, yeah. So that's the main thing that we're doing. So I'm in the Middle East on Wednesday in the Gulf States, and then so the job is, and again, the optimist in me, being an entrepreneur, like, I think there's huge assets and comparative advantages we have as the UK now, particularly post Brexit, and much as that was a tragedy in a personal opinion, the geopolitics and where we find ourselves in the world, we have comparative advantage in our rule of law, in terms of our R&D base, our great universities. We could go on and on and on about speaking about our natural assets, our historical industrial clusters. But we're targeting specific nations that have an interest, and then there are investors globally that have expressed to us parts of the industrial strategy that they're interested in as well. So, the last 6 months, but, Tim, myself and the team, we're trying to be more target around those initiatives rather than just looking globally for a travel schedule and turn up hopefully. We're trying to be very targeted on saying, look, this nation or this particular investor is interested in infrastructure or interested in offshore wind farms, an example, or whatever. And so that we're going very specifically with a targeted objective for each of those meetings rather than just representing the UK.
So finally for me, just on that question, is the future-proofing of those markets to potential shocks, given the global world where, the insecurity that's going on now across the world, how future-proof are those markets? Is that a consideration you look at?
I think we've only met twice, and you're overstating my ability to look at the things like the beyond my pay grade. Look, I think, we have two huge sources and assets that we can leverage in terms of investors. So we have the international markets and the private equity markets globally. Wherever they're domiciled will be spread globally in terms of, their risk appetite. So I think the capital markets overall, ultimately, I worry less about that. I think the underrepresented opportunity, which I knew very little about apart from the headlines 6 months ago, was what's called the Mansion House Accords and the Sterling 20. So this predates me, but we're trying to do quite a lot of work to say, look, there are tens of billions of pounds of capital locked up in our defined contribution schemes in the UK that doesn't have a risk tolerance for startup and scale-up capital in particular. And so the Mansion House Accords are an expression to try and encourage the largest 20 defined contribution pension schemes in the UK to invest in our own markets. And I think that's the biggest opportunity for us. A, because it's our own money as a nation, and B, because it doesn't play in this area historically. And where we really need capital is in the startup and scale-up communities predominantly. Not that we don't need capital for infrastructure, but I think infrastructure projects and their return profile can be they're fairly easy to invest in, notwithstanding 10, 20-year return horizons, but it's in the venture and startup stuff and our pension funds helping, and they could unlock tens of billions of capital to help us, support the industrial strategy.
Just on the markets as well, I mentioned about the expansion of the OFI, but that also came with a restructuring of existing investment resource that was in the wider department as well. And so part of that, we've focused down onto 25 core markets for investment globally, all of which your Welsh international offices overlap with. Aside from Belgium and Ireland, but we can service those quite easily from the other offices that we have in Europe, and obviously Northern Ireland, very easy for us to go between the two. So that's given an additional focus to fewer markets, again sort of honing in on those markets that we feel are highest potential over the next 10 years basically plus. Again, it's with the industrial strategy in mind and the markets that will service that the best. But it is quite a diverse spread, to your point, in terms of, if you like, economic security. I think I should also mention the Bram Wales funding that's coming through as well, I think, which is a great opportunity for us to work together in terms of, again, that balance between sort of the Welsh brand, the sectoral strengths, and some of the wider cultural and sort of, I suppose, wider asset base that Wales has to offer in that respect. So we're really looking forward to working with yourselves and obviously with the Joint Committee and the growth deal areas like Cardiff City, Cardiff Capital Region, and Ambition North Wales as well, to sort of work through how that money's put to best use. And there are instances with the sectors as well where Wales has a particularly strong offer. So like with semiconductors, where we're doing tech events, then Wales will be absolutely at the forefront of that. In March, we're going to Clean Energy in Oslo, for example, where the Celtic Sea will be front of house or on stage for that particular occasion. So there are, even though as the Minister said, it's not necessarily a Welsh only mission, if you like, but the strengths of Wales will come through in those particular environments.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Before I hand over to Ben, you mentioned earlier on, Mr Newns, about the Scottish cities coming down to London. So when are the Welsh cities coming down, or have they already been?
So they've not come. So it's an actual association in Scotland, which is why they've done it for the last few years. Actually, it's driven by themselves really, but we interlock with them as they come down and help them build a programme. So we'd be perfectly open to similarly the major Welsh cities doing something similar, but I wasn't aware of a sort of specific organisation the same way. But that's not to say it shouldn't be quite straightforward to build up.
Thank you very much. Ben Lake, please.
Chair, thank you, gentlemen, for appearing before us this afternoon. Mr Newns, you mentioned earlier that Mid Wales was a little bit more challenging to attract investment than the north and the south. As I'm a Mid Wales MP and sat next to my constituency neighbour, might I just ask very quickly, what are the challenges that you're encountering? I
think it probably would have been better for me to say we've had more success in North and South Wales, maybe, rather than say it's challenging. But I think as I say, the industries that we've focused in on in terms of clean energy, semiconductors, some of the life sciences have tended to be in North and South, but obviously I know there's advanced manufacturing opportunities as well in Mid Wales and some of the others, but I think that was more the point really. We've probably had more success with some of those core sectors in those areas.
No, thank you.
Poor
for
choice
that.
of language.
No, not at all. No, thank you. And I wonder whether you mentioned the Shotton Mill development and the semiconductors there and energy. Would you be able to share a little bit more about the pipeline of opportunities that you see Wales being able to benefit from in the forthcoming years?
I think for me, again, sorry to be relatively boring, but it's around those key sectors again. So we've got, and the team, I mean, Wales has probably had more activity from the wider OFI team than I think either of the other two, either Northern Ireland or Scotland, for example, just because of the mix of sectors. It's, most of the team has been involved, whether it's been on the semiconductor side, and that's still very active. The OFI team has also been very heavily involved in the establishment of the AI growth zones as well, working very closely with DSIT. So obviously, again, the North Wales opportunity around the AI growth zones is incredibly exciting. Around obviously the SMR powering, potentially multiple data centres in that area. But then likewise Vantage in South Wales, potential £12 billion investment pipeline there as well. So the team is very focused on both delivering some of those deals that have been announced but are still at an early stage, and then doubling down on that. So we've got data centres connected to the AI growth zones. We've got the semiconductor work, particularly in that sort of Newport corridor, if you like, and around the investment zone there. We've got clean energy. Obviously, we had the auction round announcement that was really positive news as well for Celtic Sea in terms of floating offshore wind. So again, part of the team is working actively on that, looking to build supply chain. So, I can go on, but they're the types of opportunities we're focusing in on. But again, all very much in support of the industrial strategy.
Yeah. Well, thank you. That's very, very useful. And before I ask one question just about the team that you have in Wales, one comment, Lord Stockwood, you mentioned that it's sometimes useful when you have regional mayors, for example, they'll have an economic plan and that helps inform your thinking. Do you have a similar conversation with Welsh Government, for example? Do they present a set of priorities or key sectors that they wish to benefit from your support?
The interaction tends to happen with the Industrial Strategy Board. So basically, the plans for the UK are combined, and then we get our marching orders from the Industrial Strategy Board. So I haven't had in the first 6 months, I haven't had any personal interaction. I don't know, Tim, if you have at all.
So again, the team are dealing with Welsh Government on a day-to-day basis, and we have a Deputy Director, Tom, who's based in Cardiff as well, and again, that's daily connectivity, both with the Welsh Office and also Welsh Government. So those strategies and plans are shared as they are published and generally are part of the consultation process as well. But also we interact really heavily with the likes of Cardiff Capital Region as well, and Advantage North Wales as well. So those things I think we are quite close to generally.
My final question, Chair, is just you mentioned a few members of the team there, and Liz is with us today. How many members of the team do you have based or either based in Wales or predominantly work on all matters Wales?
So we've got 13 people based in Wales, 12 of which are core DBT. Liz is our, as I say, investment partner, so she's 13th. But then, as I say, we are a team that is spread across the UK as well. So we're not all London. I mean, I'm based in Manchester actually. One of my fellow directors is based in Sheffield. So we are quite dispersed in that sense. We're not a London-centric team by any means. So, but our roles are national. So I will find. It was a great pleasure to come to Celtic Manor for the Welsh Investment Summit and spend some time down there. I'm very familiar with North Wales as well, particularly living in Manchester. I'm sure probably sick of Mancunians coming over, so we are very dispersed, and we're not sort of aside from a handful of regionally specific people and nationally specific people, we are generally a mobile team in that sense.
Thank you.
Steve Withenden, do you want to come in there?
Thank you, Chair. It was just following on from something Andrew asked before. Are certain countries prioritised over others for attracting inward investment. Just a little bit more detail on that. And if so, what's the criteria by which, they prioritise you? You've got the growth in Asia and proximity in Europe. You mentioned the Gulf states as well a moment ago. Are there ethical considerations there? What criteria is used?
Well, for selecting the inward investment, is that okay?
For where to pursue?
The ethical considerations are front of mind, by the way. So, we're looking to trade with progressive countries that share our values. It's really about the sectors. I would say what we're trying to do is, well, actually, to be honest, there's a reactionary element to what we do. So we take calls daily, weekly from countries, companies, investors looking to invest in the UK, and our job is to help filter that, match them to opportunities as well. But what we're trying to do, and this is in the last 6 months, is be more proactive and trying to select really targeted markets that have an expertise or a desire to invest in the industrial strategy 8 sectors as well. And I would say beyond this, we take our advice from the Foreign Office in terms of the ethical considerations. Like, it's beyond us to make those decisions. If the Foreign Office is happy just to trade in those countries, then we will be there. And I think open trading with markets is one way to bolster international relations anyway. I think the secondary consideration then is really looking at partnerships. What we're trying not to be is transactional as a nation as well, to make sure that we're not turning up just looking for people to write checks to us. We're trying to work on ways in which we can build our economies together. We have long-standing historical relationships with many countries. The Gulf states I'm visiting this week, we have decades worth of trading relationships and history. So we're making sure that we're prioritising long-term partnerships as well in the sectors that help us grow, but in a way that is reciprocal rather than being transactional. Because I think we've done that as a country over the last number of decades, and I don't think it serves us particularly for the long term as well. So at the moment, we take the industrial strategy as our sort of core reference point of what the government's trying to deliver. We then map that internationally to markets that have an appetite, expertise, or an interest in those sectors, and then that's when we target. And the deliverability of those investments is really key for us as well, because there'll be other markets that are new to us that might be more speculative. Like, we're on a ticking clock with getting the economy growing again, we all know that, and so we're trying to look at deliverables. So where there are long-standing relationships, where we know we have trust built, that people can transact quicker on deals, and that's important to us as well. But ultimately, it's about balancing all of those things.
Anything you'd like to add, Mr. Newns?
Yeah, no, I mentioned there were 25 markets earlier that we're focused on. Exactly as the Minister said, they've been chosen on a number of different priority levels, really. Some are chosen because they're priority capital investment markets, so the Middle East is more in that category, for example. Others more on the industrial side, like in India. Others which cover multiple, like the US, for example. So they're sort of aggregated in that respect, but very much to back up the industrial strategy, as the Minister said.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Steve. So last year, Minister, the Office for Investment had a recorded spend of about 67 million, yet this year the budget is only 24.7 million. Are you confident that's enough to be dealing with all that you do?
Yeah, I remain increasingly, day by day, more optimistic having come into the job. Look, there's always more resources, there's more to do in a day than there are hours, undoubtedly. But both our position in the world as a nation, outside of the EU in particular, and the quality of the team that we've got, I feel like the opportunities are there for us to deliver on. So, look, I tend to work with what we've been given and saying, look, there's a job to do and we're committed to it. And I think the comparative advantage is significant. So, look, whilst we're there are definitely opportunities for more resource, I don't spend my time worrying about that. I'm trying to deliver on what we've got to do. I feel the urgency of the work based on the way that our economies have been going and the way our democracy is going as well. So I spend my time thinking about the assets that we've got. We've got a really talented team that are taking the challenge on. So I think that's the way we're trying to approach it.
And I understand that, but I suppose given the fact that your budget's been slashed by more than half, are you confident that given the growth agenda, which is obviously falling in very heavily in your department, that you've got sufficient resources to actually carry out this job?
Yeah, I'd say yes to that. The reason, look, we could certainly, there are places where we could invest more. We think of the Great brand as an example, but I choose to spend my time on the positives I mean, and that's not just being tried. It's like I came into government being warned about some of the where you could spend your time or end up spending your time. And I'm saying that we've got talented people who've got a clear mandate, and we're trying to execute on that. As long as I'm the minister in the role, I'm going to focus my energy on that. And I think there is a conversation around how the civil service, how our spend expanded through COVID as an example. And I think there's some right sizing of that. The Permanent Secretary takes the time to look at that. We work very closely with our Permanent Secretary to look at the budgets, but I'm more targeted on execution, if I'm being honest. I want to make sure that I think that's a good use of my entrepreneurial energy and experience, as opposed to, and I work with the Permanent Secretary to look at the budgets at the right point. But I should say, again, in my experience, the one piece of resource that I've asked since I've come in is that we're hiring a CEO for the OFI, so someone that will outlive any ministerial appointment with a long-term view of the opportunity. I actually think it's not that political, the OFI, it's probably the least political part of government. It's about supporting our growth, supporting our industrial strategy, and supporting the team to get on with the job of doing deals and representing the UK. So hiring a CEO that's not necessarily from the civil service, I think will give us that longevity beyond ministerial appointments as well. So my hope is that, whilst the previous Minister of Investment was, I think, 9 months, I hope I make longer than 9 months, but it's not my gift. But I think the team's fantastic and working really hard, and I think a CEO that gives that 5 to 10 year view as well will make sure that execution focus remains beyond. But I hope that answers your question. I'm not trying to evade that. It's just that I've chosen to avoid getting into budget conversations and leave that to the Permanent Secretaries. I've got a view on it that we have externally, but I think the entrepreneurial energy, the deal delivery is more important for us as a team.
Thank you. Yes, Tim.
I just thought it might be worth saying as well how one of the roles of the OFI is to convene the wider government structures as well. So we take advantage of resource that is elsewhere as well. I mean, none of the projects that I've talked about today don't involve other departments. So AI growth centre, say Department for Science, Innovation, Technology are putting huge amounts. They're leading on it, putting huge amounts into it. We're supporting. Again, if it's offshore wind projects, we'll be working with Department for Energy Security, Net Zero, and so on. So, all of these things, we're very much convening resource that exists elsewhere as well to make a much greater sort of sum of the parts, if you like.
Well, so just to build on that, if I may, the initiatives we've mentioned, like AI growth zones, we've got the Strategic Sites Accelerator as well, where through the OFI, there's a targeted budget, I think, is it 600 million, Tim? 600 million to try and locate and activate strategic sites throughout the UK that can encourage economic development as well. So whilst the headcount budget has gone down, there are these initiatives that go across government that we're trying to lead as well to economic development and growth going as well. So I think we have enough in our toolkit, I would suggest, to make an impact is really the punchline.
Thank you. Andrew Ranger, please.
Thank you, Chair. So to sort of build on this point, how does the Office evaluate its activity in Wales in terms of effectiveness and value for money? Is there a mechanism that does that, or is it across the UK? Or
Yeah, we take our instruction from the industrial strategy again. So we have our own internal metrics around deal flow, hunt lists, to make sure we meet weekly to ensure that all of the growth sectors and also the foundation of the economy has enough resource and a pipeline of investors and businesses that want to support those areas. But we're really measured by the industrial strategy quarterly reports, and is that activity sufficiently on target? So internal metrics, something, but I think that's the really thing that we're looking at.
Yeah, and they're at a UK level, but we will obviously have conversation with Welsh Government as well about day-to-day activities and how we're, if at the end of the year we'll look at the figures, and there will be a conversation every year about that as well locally and how we're doing. So as the Minister say, we judge ourselves at macro level, if you like, in that sense, but that's not to say those conversations won't be going on with Liz and others about how that performance looks on the ground here.
So they will feed back into you in terms of, say their targets are about employment and the quality of that employment, for example, the skill level, and other things, regional prosperity, whatever it may be. They will feed that back into you, but you're sort of more of at a macro level in terms of how you're measuring the success, I suppose, of the activities you're taking.
Yeah, I mean, our role is to try and find capital to support the local plans. allied to the industrial strategies we've said. So, we see ourselves as trying to make sure that if a national government or a local authority or a combined authority has a plan, then our role is to make sure that's capitalised. Ultimately, it's down to them to convince, alongside us, the deliverability of that project. So we can walk someone to the door, find the capital, but ultimately it's about deliverability of the local delivery team as well. So we see our role in the part of the value chain is to ensure that we help the projects get capitalised, or that businesses land in this, as opposed to the overall economic strategy for that region, if that makes sense.
It does, yeah. No, thank you very much. Thank you.
Simon Hall, please.
Thank you, Chair. Minister, you're new to post from a heritage of business rather than of politics. So I wanted to ask you a sort of first base type question, if I may, which is, we know that the world is a highly competitive place for investment, and there's lots of emerging countries who are looking for investment, so on and so forth. We know that. And you've spoken, and the questions have we've got city mayors, we have the Senedd, we've got the Scottish Parliament, we've got the Northern Ireland Assembly, we've got the London Assembly, we've got the myriad departments of Westminster, etc. Bearing in mind that we're arguably a small archipelago of islands just off the coast of northern France to a lot of the world, are we just too complex in the mosaic that we offer? I.e., if you had a clean sheet of paper, would you be saying, look, this is something which is best led as a front door from London, and then have designated people in all quarters of the UK, that you then turn around and say, right, you are now going to do the hand-holding bit of the relationship, walk them through local rules and bylaws, planning, so on and so forth? Do we not just make it a bit complicated rather than, come to France or come to Germany?
No, it's fascinating. We could fill the next hour in this one, couldn't we? I think. I'll try and keep it brief. The sort of philosophical belief going into this is devolution matters. I believe that. I believe that in the idea of subsidiarity, and the people local to an issue understand their problems and challenges, and more importantly, their opportunities as well. So I think an over-centralised system is kind of what got us here. Kind of peaked. The apotheosis was 2008, and the sort of version of capitalism that we had, and the sort of centralised government that we had. It's kind of why we're here today, right, with our politics. So I think the philosophical points, I believe in that. I believe that, the reason that my hometown of Grimsby was one of the highest Brexit voting places in the UK is because it felt disenfranchised by national politics. I didn't understand that at the time because I was living in North London. But I think people understand, that if you're of a certain political background based in Whitehall and you're trying to make protestations around what's good for Grimsby or for Cardiff or for Wrexham or for Newcastle, I think fundamentally that's flawed. So that's kind of the philosophical view. I think to address that, we need to rebuild local government to have that capability. When I talk about what we see coming into government 6 months ago, is that the level of maturity and capability within those different devolved regions and combined authority varies massively. And that's partly a time thing, that's partly a capability thing, that's partly a character thing as well. But I think in its best, I believe that that's the model that works, because those regions are sufficiently large enough to have impact on the lives of people and also to be investable. When you're talking about several million people, budgets of tens of billions, that's a sort of investable size, but at the same time has the local knowledge and insight to make the impact as well. So I think we need to do a bit of both ends of the telescope. So at sort of one end, we need to be definitely talking about the great brand, invest in the UK, invest in Wales, invest in Scotland, invest in Northern Ireland. I think that's specific and aggregate level. But I think that local knowledge, when mapped to a high-level plan of an industrial strategy, I think is the right balance. Because you can't do it all, and what we've said is, where do we have comparative advantage internationally in those 8 sectors? And therefore, the regions then can say, well, this is what we have in terms of local skills, capability and desire to meet that. And then with finite resource, we can try and make that work. I think where the wheels come off is where you have lots of different plans that aren't connected to a national strategy, that has no sight of a local desire and impact as well. And I genuinely have been encouraged in the 5 months, 6 months I've been doing this, is that I think we've got the constituent parts right. There's more devolution coming for England in particular. I think we can work work better, and I think there's ways of developing that. But I personally believe in devolution. I think without that local insight of understanding what communities want, what their capabilities are, but you also need that top of the funnel, what's the industrial strategy at scale that we can raise tens of billions around, you know, the industrial strategy as well, to make sure that we're making the large impact that we make nationally. And there's going to be choices in that as well. Not every area of the UK can be excellent in each area, and it shouldn't be. And so there's some competitive tension in there, some trade-offs in that. But I think it gives us the best chance in a competitive global market. But I've been more encouraged globally about we are well viewed in the world globally still. Our reputation is well founded, and so I think I've been encouraged by that as well. Sorry.
I mean certainly on the granular knowledge point, when we undertook a committee trip to the States on this part of this inquiry, I think we were very struck by the first of all the importance that having a mayor can have as that sort of pinnacle local point of contact, but also in relation to the semiconductor sector, our attention was drawn to the fact that a much sort of faster, swifter, knowledgeable response came from Cardiff than ever came from Westminster. But in that sort of mosaic, and it is a mosaic of sort of often competitive voices. Now, Google tells me, I hope it's not incorrect, that you were once the managing director of something called Match.com.
I recognise you from that. Is that you familiar with that?
Maybe not in this light, but touche, Minister. Damn, my secret's out. But it all went very well. You'll be delighted to know. And it was long-term rather than just transactional. You'll be delighted. Even with my surname, I have to be careful on that. Then, Minister, what I want... Do you see part of your role as sort of and I don't mean this in an actual sense, but the sort of head of the period as the Minister of HMG, with responsible for this, would you have a conversation with somebody and then you say, now in actual fact you need to go and talk to what's his name who is in Cardiff or is in Belfast or is in Yorkshire or somewhere like that? You will act as the sort of matchmaker and handholder, developing that relationship? Yeah,
definitely. More the team than me, if I'm honest. I've been 6 months into the role, but we have deep knowledge, sector expertise. I mean, mate, my background in dating, but Tim's background, is building industrial strategies from the Manchester region as well. So they've got deep expertise across the team, and we're making sure that what we want to do is, look, one of the things that I'm very cognizant of is that the deliverability. I keep saying this, so apologies, but one of the things that we don't want to get bogged down in is when a commercial operator or an investor looks at an investable opportunity, the pace that we've got to operate is the pace of the commercial sector. Yes. And so we're looking around and going, there's an opportunity there, and we know those people in that region because they've declared they're interested, they're ready to go. So it is relationship based on that way, but the team tried to look at the strategies and plans and build the relationships in the region so they know who the person to pick up the phone to. Because these are, if you have the commercial pace versus sometimes the governmental pace, that's when we are in danger of that capital going to different markets. Singapore's held up as one of the bright lights of where you can get to a minister. I went to Saudi Arabia, and a friend of mine had gone there the month before, and he showed me, if you're trying to invest in Saudi Arabia, you go to one building and you literally just go around the different desks and you leave within an afternoon. Yes. And you're ready to trade. Whereas we send people, so the Office for Investment, one of our other roles is we try and act as, I don't know, it diminishes we're a glorified concierge service. We want to make sure that we're saying, we see an opportunity there, we know Cardiff's brilliant for this, let's pick up the phone to their representatives in that region and try and match them as well. So it's not all like that, but that's definitely, we're trying to, on that deliverability, and we're trying to short circuit the service to where we know with a degree of confidence that we can get these projects delivered.
When was the last time you would have had a conversation with the First Minister?
It was in December when I was in Cardiff, I believe. So yeah.
And is that a regular programme to make sure that there's a marrying up of strategy?
No, to be honest, no.
Should it be?
Probably, yeah. Actually, yeah. So the team have day-to-day connections, but what I've said is that I'm trying to. Firstly, I was trying to make sure there's clarity of purpose for the OFO around the industrial strategy. We've done that within the first few months. Secondly, I'm trying to make sure I'm personally out there meeting people that have the large pools of capital. But that's probably a good encouragement for the next year. As long as I stay in the role, I think it'd be good to have those relationships and ensure I'm getting instruction as well.
Now, we've also heard during this inquiry that the relationship between different departments of the Department for Business and Trade and the Welsh Government can be inconsistent, and also with other government departments back to Cardiff. What's your role, if any, and if not yours, whose, to try to better coordinate to get as much uniformity as possible?
It's interesting because I haven't seen my role as coordinating internally in government so much as the strategy. We definitely have a coordination role on the commercial side. So if someone comes to us and is struggling to navigate through government, then we often, by the nature of my role between Treasury and DBT, we have a dual sort of reporting line already. I have a weekly call with number 10 as well, and the senior business advisors there. And clearly have relationships throughout the whole of government, but I haven't seen it on the other side of that. From a strategic point of view, the teams work very closely with all the regions, but I haven't been asked to do a coordinating role on strategy, as it were, yet. But certainly I'm available if people need to navigate the government. But there are better people with experience in government for navigating.
I mean, my heart always sinks when I hear, and ministers of all colours say it, rest quietly, we have a strategy. As if the ownership of the strategy is the answer to the problem or the question, and we know that it's not. So it's not so much coordinating the strategy, but coordinating the message, the overtures, the meetings, the overall approach that fleshes out the skeleton plan of a strategy. That must rest with you, Minister, surely.
I'm happy to reflect on that. 6 months in, clarity of the strategy and delivery. As an entrepreneur, strategy is almost worthless without. Yes. I mean, that's where I've lived my life. So I take that point actually. Maybe that's something for me to reflect on. I haven't, because I haven't come from a political background. Execution is everything, and so we are executing at pace, at scale, to the ambition of the UK. And I think this continues me being a minister, by the way. This is a continuation. I think I've added some clarity to that with the team's construction and the focus on the areas that we give on. I haven't spent a lot of time as of yet on that political coordination. I'm absolutely available if there are ministers or there are people in the political system that feel like they're not getting the service they want, specifically from my department. But that hasn't been a call on my time or demand on my time yet. So I'm happy to take that feedback and reflect on it. But it hasn't been a demand in the first 6 months.
Maybe you could write to us on that.
Yeah, happy to.
And Chair, my final question, I suppose it follows on from the sort of strategy. And all I
think Mr. Newns would like.
Well, if I could just finish with the Minister. I mean, what I would just sort of encourage you is that the civil service and everything else, and Whitehall has a wonderful way of sort of getting its claws into people from business and moulding them into the sort of perfect Whitehall creature. And in actual fact, having that entrepreneurial, and I don't use this in a rude sense, the brashness of business actually helps enormously. So all power to your elbow. What does, let's say in 5 years' time, or moving towards the end of this Parliament, what makes your involvement look either successful or a failure in this absolutely critical endeavour?
Yeah. The success is straightforward for me. Is the growth mission of the UK overall, and making sure that the industrial strategy is funded not just with reactive historical relationships, but actually with a proactive, forward-facing, front-leaning initiative. So we're really moving the RFI from reacting to investors wanting to come to the UK to going and finding the right partners. So my mission's aligned with that of both the Treasury and DBT, which is stability in the UK economy overall, so bringing inflation rates down, getting the growth rates up, making sure employment goes to all the regional sectors, and then specifically the investment market that we want to make sure the differentiated comparative advantage the UK has, that's well understood and being well served, and actually the UK is the destination and choice for investors globally. And then a third one, it's kind of in reaction to your comment about the civil service. So I want to make the RFI the most high-performing department in government as well. I think we've got the capability and the people in that. And I mention that for a reason, is because my experience so far, like notwithstanding they have to tell me when to put a tie on to go into meetings. That's the entrepreneur in me, which I do take instruction from. It's like, it is very entrepreneurial. The people that are hired, the senior directors, are very independent, acting on their own initiative, and so they should be, because I think where we have the best opportunity is to not worry about the politics and say, look, we have got a clear plan, and we'll execute irrespective of who the minister is, quite frankly, and who's, but sort of the macro stuff around the economy overall, the growth and investment. But for me, making it a high-performing team and focusing on it, which is what I intend to do, and the CEO coming to do, to make sure we're building on the existing capabilities, which I found to be exemplary so far.
Thank you, Minister.
I was just going to mention very quickly that the background strategy that drives us, the industrial strategy, was obviously developed with massive consultation with Welsh Government, Wales Office directly involved, and we do work incredibly closely with the Wales Office and Secretary of State for Wales as well, who has an explicit responsibilities to ensuring that UK Government and Welsh Government work efficiently together. So that goes on at a macro level. It'd be interesting to pick up what the inconsistencies are that you've seen, because we'll obviously check into that, and we'd like to do that. But I'm aware that there's a really solid relationship between OFI, the wider Department for Business and Trade, and also the Welsh Government as well. But I think, to your point around coordination, I mean, at project level, that's absolutely what we do. We try and iron out the sort of complexity of both UK government, local government, national government, and make it as simplistic, almost act as an agent for the company that we're representing, to clear that path and make it as simple and straightforward as possible. So I think on a project level, we absolutely do that. We try and bring all the right parties to the table. And then it's a mixture, really, because some of the levers that we use are national and UK level, National Wealth Fund, some of the big Automotive Transformation Fund, whatever they may be, and some of them are very much local and might come from Cardiff Capital Region, for example, also co-investing alongside national government, which obviously we've had a number of examples of that type of setup just in the last 12, 24 months, actually, with some of the projects that I've mentioned. So I think generally the partnership works well, but yeah, be interested if you've seen those inconsistencies. We'll look into them.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Sam. Henry Tuffman, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. I just wanted to touch on, ask the question as to why Wales is lagging behind other regions in the UK in respect of FDI. And there are obviously levers on a UK level that have been pulled, but that doesn't explain, for instance, we had the Harrington review of FDI 2023, but a lot of those levers that we talk about, and we've had evidence from the CBI in Wales talking about the importance of reducing the cost of business. But why do you think it is that Wales lags behind, particularly when looking on a UK level?
Can I generally clarifying question is that which data are you looking at and say they're lagging behind?
Well, in terms of amount of foreign direct investment or inward investment into Wales as a region within the context of the UK.
I think Tim quoted earlier, proportionately to the population, it's probably on target. So there's not, and by the way, I'm not disagreeing that there isn't work to do, but when I think about the last 6 months overall, I don't know, Tim, if you want to clarify on that.
I think I mentioned at the start, really, that the picture has been improving for the last few years. So that the latest figures show certainly a proportionate amount of investment coming into Wales as part of the overarching UK picture, about 4.7%. But as we say, we wouldn't sort of be complacent about that, and we'd still look to build on that.
Perhaps I can help. I mean, in terms of the DPT figures, they show consistently that Wales has never actually gone above the 100 projects, whereas Scotland has only ever once dropped below the 100 projects. So I think that's probably where, well, certainly I'm coming from. I'm sure Henry's coming from the same place.
Yeah, and look, there's been, in terms of attractiveness set out, but there's been reports done by organisations setting out like on a UK attractiveness level. I mean, Wales doesn't. So I'm not. There seems to be a disconnect behind what the committee has found in terms of our research through the inquiry and what you may be setting out in respect of what information or what analysis you're doing on the ground.
I think it potentially just depends on what you're analysing, I suppose. And as I
I
say,
think we're being too ambitious.
well, no, never been too ambitious. No, I suppose what I was going to point to is we've switched focus from volume to value really over the last sort of 4 or 5 years, which has meant that the sheer number of projects that certainly we'll intervene in has reduced, but the value of those projects has gone up significantly. Also, global FDI has reduced as well over the last few years. So although the UK still is third globally in that context, the project numbers have decreased, but the value of those projects has gone up dramatically as well. Mm-hmm. And I think Wales has generally reflected that national picture as well. But I think there are, depending on the sectors as well, and obviously Wales has distinctive sectors, they will have had success or less success in different economic environments over the last 5 years as well. So we're aware that advanced manufacturing at a UK level, there are challenges, there are barriers that we're very aware of, things like energy, pricing, for example, which we're looking at countering with the British Industrial initiative around the BIC, bringing some of those costs down significantly for companies that will make us more competitive. And I think those types of factors in specific industries, Wales obviously very strong on advanced manufacturing, will hopefully have a really strong impact on the attractiveness overall of the UK and Wales in that sector in particular as well.
I think just to build on that, for me, I mean, the macro challenges that the UK has faced over the last sort of 5 to 10 years are really, about our ability to deliver predictable returns for investors. And I think some of our politics hasn't helped with that in terms of, the industrial strategy, much as I keep going on about it, it's the first time we've had a long-term plan since the 1960s. So again, having a predictable, investable plan, having a macro environment where, as difficult some of those decisions were by the government, the ability to stabilise interest rates, bring interest rates down, 6 Bank of England rate cuts, create an investable environment that looks like stability with fiscal rules that we're going to stick by. The sort of investors we're talking about are looking for that sort of certainty and stability. That's the precursor to investment decisions at sort of the level and the international stage. So I think we well, not specifically about Wales, I think the ability to show a stability, predictable plan for the country, it needs delivering, to your point earlier, absolutely, but that's the foundational level that allows us to go and have those investor conversations. There are weird sort of offshoots of that around, what's being put out in the international press around the UK as a place to invest as well that we've got to combat. And I think the stage for this year is really reinforcing our comparative advantage as a nation, as a country, and that stability that we're promoting. But that's not specific to Wales, but I think that's the work that's been done in the last 18 months. And certainly when we're travelling now, that's what we see as being understood relative to the sort of geopolitics and the macro environment when people have investment choices.
If I may, Chair, can I just explore one point? I mean, you've talked about your, from an intellectual, philosophical basis, your support for devolution and the importance of those decisions being made locally. And if you're acting as a concierge service for investment, Wales does have particular challenges. I think we've noted, certainly in my constituency, public transport challenges, broadband challenges. Do you think there's a lack of understanding about those nature of those challenges within, when you're fronting, the investment opportunities for places like the constituency that I represent in Pembrokeshire, in terms of that local knowledge?
Honest answer is I don't know. I mean, I think about the issues that you've highlighted there. There are places in the north of England that have the same problem. So they're not unique to your constituency. They exist up and down the UK. I think when I talk about devolution, I think it's important that they're partners to a national strategy. So I don't think they're up and down, because I think that discredits the local work that's done. I think they're partners, that you need the local knowledge and the understanding. but there are competitive tensions at a national level as well. So both those conversations need to meet to be successful in my mind. I think a fully devolved government wouldn't work. I think a fully centralised government wouldn't work as well. I think that's the path we're on. So when I talk about devolution, undoubtedly, we need to make sure there are strong relationships and conversations and strategies locally as well that we can then meet in the middle and make sure that we're doing our part of that bargain as well. So that answers your question. Sorry, it's not a call philosophically to swing one way or the other. I think they're both important, but certainly representing the issues around infrastructure. That's something that we're aware of. That's something that gets fed back to us, because when we're looking at investable propositions, infrastructure is clearly a part of that as well. And then we try and leverage the initiatives that Tim mentioned, whether that's grid connections, whether that's infrastructure, relationships and conversations to lean into that. But that's not the specific role of the OFI.
Yeah, I think we will report back and we will escalate where we see those barriers. So, and I should say, within this investment space, it is very much a partnership between us, if you like, at UK level and Welsh Government, and also local authority level as well, in terms of, I've mentioned sort of Cardiff Capital Region, obviously Advantage North Wales, but also individual local authorities as well. We will deal with around those specific projects as well and opportunities. So we utilise that local knowledge to gain that experience. So the work we've been doing in South Wales, looking around Port Talbot, around some of the projects, advanced manufacturing, clean energy projects, but also data centres, power availability, for example, in South Wales has been a big factor for that. So our Connections Acceleration Service, which is relatively new service that we've set up to address some of these barriers, has gone in there, looked at the availability. The long-term availability will be a constraint to major manufacturers that need big power connections down there. And so we're just in the process of gradually escalating that, essentially, to see how do we solve those issues, because part of the solution might also be inward investment as well, either through further capital investment, private capital, or through a new power and utilities sort of investment that could come in to service that. So we will look at those things specifically. Also very aware that some of the sites, and the Minister's absolutely right, these are not isolated in UK terms, but neither are they consistent in every place as well. They do exist. But the remediation level that's required on some of the key sites in Wales is also really challenging. And I think what we're trying to do, and the Minister mentioned the initiative called the Strategic Sites Accelerator. I think one of the issues with that's trying to solve is where we do have some challenges around deliverability of a site that could support the acceleration of the industrial strategy, that we're able to use that fund to intervene there to make that accelerant. But we do ideally need an end user that's interested, or we need some demand signals from the market to know that we can actually make that investment work and stack up, that it's not highly speculative. I think what's very different or very difficult in the current market is making highly speculative opportunities stack up, because the funding is so complex, construction costs are so expensive at the moment. But we are constantly trying to sort of innovate on the levers that we have available to us to try and pick at those barriers as we see them. But as I say, from the partnership work that we have with Welsh Government, with the Wales Office, with local authorities, we're constantly sort of aware of tensions in the marketplace, if you like, that could be potential barriers to investment.
If I just build on that as well, I was talking earlier around the coordination elements at the right scale as well. I think the UK government's put 400 million into rail infrastructure, and I think it's making sure that there's a coordination at a national or a regional level at least to make sure the projects, from our point of view, are investable to sort of investors that we talk to at the sort of tens of millions and into the billions as well. So I think there's something around ensuring that there's a coordinated narrative for regions as well, because again, it helps in terms of building the case within national government, but B, from our point of view, it makes it more investable. The amount of effort for us to go and do a 10 million deal is probably the same as doing a 10 billion deal, to be honest. So again, it's about where we can place the resource that we have to make impact as well. So coordination is really helpful to build a narrative like in the Oxford-Cambridge corridor I mentioned, or the Northern Corridor as well, as we're seeing across the north of England now as well. So this is, I think that's the next stage of work for us, is how we help Wales tell that story in a more coherent way, because there isn't a single document or strategy or prospectus for us at the moment. So I think that's a good action off the back of this meeting.
Simon Hall, please.
Just picking up on Mr. Tuffle's point, there's a chicken and egg problem there, isn't there? That you go out and you talk, yes, we'd love to come to the UK. And then a basic table stake is power, water, qualified, enthusiastic staff, etc., etc., and so on. And then you fall at a hurdle, a basic one. There's not enough stuff on the grid to power whatever it is you want to do. But by the time the grid has sorted that out, that investment has gone elsewhere. And not only is that opportunity lost, but subsequent opportunities from that same investor, because they'll just say, oh, it's a complete and utter waste of time. So going back to that sort of coordination point, who, rather than sort of respond, ad hoc, does anybody triage and map the UK to better target? And just while I've got the thought, who is our main competitor at the moment for inward investment, and what differentiates them from here?
Well, Tim can talk a second about the AI growth zones, but we also have a triage service on the grid connection. So the stuff you mentioned is the right stuff. It's grid connection. Well, access to talent, I don't think we have a problem with in the UK.
No.
I think wherever we go, we can tell that story. But the grid connections, particularly with the upsurge in data centres and the number of projects that we see, is a massive one. But also on the on the green energy initiatives around wind farms as well. So we play an active role in that. What's the initiative? Is it called the Grid Connections Triage?
There's the Connections Accelerator Service, CAS,
which we take a list and we try and help with that deliverability in projects. But you're right, I mean, that is one of the barriers to our growth at the moment, is how we upgrade the infrastructure that we have. And certainly what we're trying to do is make sure that combination of high value job creation and deliverability, and the deliverability again is massive for us, because if we keep people in the system, so there's a bunch of speculative initiatives from investors, landowners just wanting grid connections, so we try and play an active role in making sure that we're helping highlight the ones that are deliverable. And then to your second question around who we compete, it depends on the sector, so it really does. So for life sciences as an example, there'll be on the US in particular, or we'll have strict competition coming out of China in particular on some of those sectors, or advanced manufacturing, again you have to look east for a lot of those things. So it really depends sector specific. But what I would say, as much as it sticks in my throat to say this, that being outside of the EU, even though we need to get close to our biggest trading partner, has given us the opportunity to go and set trading agreements globally as well. And that helps us understand the comparative advantage and what they're trying to focus on for their own investment as well at the same time. So it varies by sector, but I think we're well placed, particularly that stability message comes through very, very often, is that particularly when they're looking at 5 to 10 year event horizons on their investments, they feel like the UK offers that sort of certainty in an increasingly volatile and complex world.
Thank you.
Thank you. Very brief.
Very brief. I was just going to say, to your point on the coordination of sites with the right amenities, if you like, I think the AI growth zones are a very good representation of that. There's a huge amount of upfront due diligence done on those sites, based on power, water, all those availabilities before they're essentially cleared. So at the point that they're announced, as obviously the two in Wales have been, then we know it's a proposition that we can confidently go to market with.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. I suppose during the course of the inquiry, we took evidence from a number of businesses, some of whom have tried to invest in Wales, some of whom have, CBI Wales, and during those roundtables, they tend to express a frustration at there are many front doors, and they don't have many. Once you're in through a front door, you're not having a coordinated approach behind it. So I suppose, what impact do you think there would be if we had, say, an arm's length investment promotion agency like we used to have? Those of us are old enough to remember the Welsh Development Agency, for instance. What sort of impact do you think that would have?
We can talk about the split. I think positive. I mean, to the point that the visit to Wrexham and Cardiff is like, there are a lot of people who are trying to do their best work in trying to, for their particular regions, but I think having a single coordinating from a commercial background in particular, for the best will in the world, we are trying to have the right relationships locally, but, there are finite resources to your earlier point. I think we work well with Invest Northern Ireland and the Scottish equivalent, so it seems to me that's a part of the puzzle that would be helpful, but I don't know if, Tim, your experience is longer than mine.
Yeah, I think evidence definitely backs up the fact that places with an investment promotion agency tend to be more successful in terms of investment attraction. I mean, we work across, at the moment in Wales, we work across, as I say, a number of departments within Welsh Government, depending on the opportunity. So we'll work with sector teams, we'll work with the Trade and Invest team in Wales, we'll work with the Welsh Office, we'll work with the local authorities or the city regional authorities. And so it's, we work our way through it, and we've got good relationships there. But I think a single agency brings a level of coordination that is helpful. And we certainly work well with Scottish Development International, with Invest Northern Ireland, as the Minister said. And they also bring huge resource with them as well. It is very much a partnership. This is a joint effort between both UK Government, Welsh Government, obviously. And I mean, I think Scottish Development International have about 220 people, 80 of which are investment focused. Invest Northern Ireland have around 500 people, of which not all of them are investment focused, granted, but again, a proportion, a decent proportion of those are investment focused. And it does make a difference. It does make a difference. But as I say, at the moment we work through the systems that are here, and we hope that we still can provide a sort of strong offer to businesses, and a more simplified offer to businesses. But I think, as I say, the evidence always suggests, as someone that used to run an investment agency for a place, the evidence suggests it makes a difference. And certainly my experience is it makes a big difference to be able to just provide clarity, a single front door, really clear marketing projection, targeting of the companies that you want, clarity on who's doing that, and how projects are handled once they hit the system as well, and are then followed up and account managed afterwards. So my experience is it's a very positive thing.
Obviously you would know coming from Midas. So in terms of obviously setting up some of this arm's length agency, if you like, in terms of sort of funding, would the UK government be looking to help with the funding of this if it were to come into being alongside the Welsh government, for instance?
I have no idea when that would have to come back to you, as it's a new idea. I wasn't thinking about it beforehand, so we have to come back to you on that. But I'm not familiar with how they're funded. They're funded through the settlement with combined authorities traditionally. So,
yeah, I think in Northern Ireland and in Scotland that they are self-financed.
Thank you, that's helpful. Okay, I'm going to move on to Jill German, please. You've been very patient.
Thank you, Chair. And it moves us quite nicely onto my question, actually. We've mentioned the compound semiconductor cluster in South Wales, and when we visited the United States as a committee, there was, the companies there were really impressed with that cluster and the amount of knowledge that they had of what existed in that area. We know there's other successful clusters in Wales as well, so creative industries in South Wales, agri-tech and decarbonisation in Deeside and Wrexham. So we know that those clusters are there. So how does the Office for Investment engage with those Welsh clusters, and how do we make sure that we proactively promote those competitive advantages so that investors out there know what these areas of Wales have to offer, possibly through an agency that we've spoken about, but how does it happen now?
So new into the role, so now, when I get a brief from the team, whenever I'm going out internationally or speaking to investors around where are the opportunities throughout the whole of the UK, that I can be speaking to specific investors who have an appetite in those particular regions. So I take instruction from the team as to an investor. So if it's infrastructure, for example, I'll be talking about certain projects. If it's in the creative industry, it'll be a separate project at the moment. So what we try and do is try and map an investor's appetite for investment in a particular region with the places that the team knows already. I don't know, Tim, is there anything to build on that?
Yeah, and I think there's particular initiatives in particular sectors as well. So there's the creative industries clusters, for example. There's work we do specifically on that. There's all the international outward-facing work that sort of the UK does, that also Welsh Trade and Invest will push particular opportunities it's interested in. And so, there's been recent visits to semiconductor-specific conferences, for example, whereas I mentioned before, sort of Wales and South Wales have been very much at the forefront of the UK offer with a lot of that. And I mentioned before about, there's a clean energy event in Oslo that, again, Celtic Seaport is going to be very much sort of front and centre of that as well. So what we tend to do is, at the moment, is very much look at the sectoral aspect of it and back that. There's also a huge number of in-visits that we help facilitate as well, again, supported by local partners and Welsh Government. The Minister mentioned an Omani visit that he joined, but likewise we get multiple sector visits from, again, our key markets across the world, and we help facilitate those and actually bring them in to see it. Again, my experience is people are much more likely to invest if they've actually seen a place and can actually see the sort of tangibility of what it looks like in the flesh, and also gain the confidence in the people that they've met that this can happen, they can actually deliver it as well. I think in areas like creative industries, as I say, that Wales has been particularly successful, and I think that's a combination of the very focused promotional work that's happened around Bad Wolf and the Dragon Studios, etc., or whether it's on the gaming side as well, and the intervention that Welsh Government has made on some of those has been very strategic and very specific, and I think that's proven to be incredibly successful. So I think, again, having that very focused approach around a particular asset, like in Bad Wolf and creative industries, knowing the market you're going to and having those specific visits, knowing the potential investors that you're going to, and then having those specific levers to make sure you can get a deal over the line. Because also, once one's successful, then it brings confidence from others as well. So I think that would be the approach that I know in particular, as I say, in creative industries, and to an extent in the likes of semis as well, has been successful so far. And I think a continuation of that and building on that will allow us to hopefully increase the overall volume of and capital investment into Wales.
I mean, just to build on that, when the Omani ambassador wanted to get outside of London, we chose Cardiff. He had an interest in semiconductors, he had an interest in the space industry, so we introduced to Space Forge, and he had an interest in sending his daughter to the university as well, so we thought we'd kill all birds with that stone. But it was just a way to say, look, these are investors with a love of the UK overall and a desire to see opportunities as well, and by building that capability, taking them to the Principality Stadium and just showing them the different assets around the UK, it just builds a different picture of the investable opportunities, we think, as well.
Yeah, it's interesting the point that you made about investing in places, because we heard that very strongly from the diaspora when we did the visit to the States, that they were very invested in Wales, not just because of the economic potential, but of that idea of place and belonging and Wales as a nation, and indeed the different parts of Wales that and what they can offer.
I think this is one of the biggest strengths of Wales, by the way. If you like, just to divert a second, so one of the reasons I've ended up in politics is my own hometown, Grimsby. I've spent the last 5 or 6 years, because doing this, focused on how you rebuild institutions in that town to make it investable, to build the confidence. We bought the football club, we're building a youth facility, social housing, so you can tell a different story. I really admire the work that that's happening in Port Talbot now as an example around you've got to rebuild the institutions in a place and lean back towards its historical precedents to lean forward into the future about new industries as well. And I think there's this idea of how do you connect the diaspora and everything people are proud of in their place. I mean, this government's putting $5 billion into the Pride in Place initiative. I think that's our most critical intervention as a government. I think the economy stuff is going to work. I'm bound to say that, not just from an OFI, but I can see the path now towards the building. But it's how we connect that with people's resonance to where their identity matters to them. And I think Wales speaks strongly to that, particularly in the regions of Wales. I think that's the real asset, the natural asset that we've got to utilise. So, sorry, I diverted slightly there, but I see that really powerfully, particularly
I completely agree, and say we've heard it in previous evidence, and it goes back to the point about devolution as well, that you can make most of that place to make it attractive. So just with that in mind, do you think there's a place for clusters to support investment in more rural and coastal areas. So in North Wales, for example, the Federation of Small Businesses Wales put out a report to say that there was potential for a sort of a more rural coastal creative cluster that would feed into the work going on in the Northern Corridor, because geographically actually we go across rather than down. So I just wondered what you thought about that, and if there's potential for SMEs to grow around that kind of cluster.
Definitely is. I think the danger is trying to have a top-down strategy around clusters and trying to make it work with local communities as well. I think we've got to be respectful and realistic about, trying to, if it doesn't exist naturally, either trying to, if we set the conditions for that flourishing, or recognising that, SMEs have their own value and right to exist as well as a separate part of the nation's strategy. One of the things I was really encouraged when we went to Wrexham in recently was there was an amazing entrepreneur, I don't want to mispronounce her name, but Ellen Half-Davis, I think, who built a clinical trials business called Aparito, and she was talking about setting a cluster of entrepreneurs in the north through the universities and connecting. And so I'm meeting her in a couple of weeks as an entrepreneur. Someone believes in that. So if you can find that initial spark of energy around the cluster, that's about entrepreneurship, about creativity, around building businesses, irrespective of their cluster or sector. But that in itself has real value, but it needs that initial spark as well. So I think the top-down industrial strategy is absolutely vital, but I think we've got to be really careful not try and shoehorn every community to fit with that as well. But I think that entrepreneurial energy of someone like Ellen needs supporting as well. So I'm going to meet her personally to see what we can do around the entrepreneurial community, and it's a different sector of the in our sort of VC. How we build those ecosystems and the access to capital in that sector, but that's something that I think could work around a looser cluster around entrepreneurship potentially as well.
And allow those dots to be joined,
exactly.
sort of bottom up as opposed to top down. I think you're right, we do need both.
I think the worst thing you can do is try and impose a cluster on an ecosystem if it's not there naturally, and there aren't local people who are either representative of that skill set initiative, is doomed to failure because government strategy will come in and change. Whereas I think something like Ellen saying, look, entrepreneurs can exist in any shape and form, we just need to put some wind in her sails, quite frankly, so we'll do that.
There seems to be potential to join up people across rural and coastal areas in that way if they can naturally find each other.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Tim, very briefly, so I've got one final question.
No problem. I was just going to say, I think that's where the partnership comes in as well, between national, local as well, because only certain places will have what we refer to as the sort of absorptive capacity, so the sort of foundations of skills and capital and facilities, etc., to attract investment. Not everywhere can, but what's the important thing is when we do land something like that, how you connect it into those local ties. And I think Lockheed found this very much recently in the space industry in the northeast. They landed thinking there's not a space industry here at all, but within 6 months of doing analysis about the companies that were actually there, they realised that even though they weren't facing the space industry at the moment, there was at least 35 to 40 really strong supply chain companies that could face into the space industry. And that was, again, with a lot of help from local authorities that really knew the business space well and can start to plug it all together. So I think that's where that partnership really works well.
Know your places, know your people.
Exactly.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Final question, Ben Lake, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, gentlemen. My colleague, Giles Ribben, they mentioned the diaspora, and that's one of the aspects that Global Welsh, an organisation that sort of try to represent the Welsh people abroad, are quite keen to see more work being done to engage with the diaspora, particularly with a view of attracting more investment into Wales. And indeed, a survey they ran found that a quarter of Welsh business people abroad said they would be willing to invest in Wales immediately, I think they mentioned. So I'm just interested, is this something that is on your radar? And if so, what sort of steps are you taking to try and tap into that diaspora? Because other countries have been quite successful by tapping into their respective diasporas to build up their brand on the international stage.
Yeah, I mean, I love the idea. It's not been on our radar, it has been personally. So I think there's a underutilised connection into place and identity. Particularly, that's why I've ended up doing the work in Grimsby, quite frankly. I haven't lived there since I was 18. But it's given me my identity and my connection and where my friends are still. So whether there are initiatives that are undergoing, I'm not familiar with any. I think you're right to call out. I mean, one of the things is I talked about the defined pension schemes, so the DC schemes, the defined contribution schemes, is that you're giving people some agency about where they invest would be an idea that I've thought about, but there isn't any particular initiatives. But I'd love to and maybe work with you and think about that, because I do think it's an undertapped resource. The one area where it is being worked on, and I'm attending my first board, I think in a couple of weeks, is the I'll get this wrong now, it's the Office of Impact Investments, which now sits in the Cabinet Office under Darren Jones. I think what they're trying to do is look at how it's regards to impact investment, but it's philanthropy and other asset classes that could be focused on it. I think it would fit really neatly into there. So maybe we could think of that collectively. I'm happy to give that some thought myself, because I do think it's a massive opportunity, because where you've got capital and emotional connection to a place is where it's most powerful as well.
Yeah, I think also sometimes, I mean, the Irish do it brilliantly. Obviously the Scots have Global Scots as well, which is very strong. And I've certainly had, I remember meeting the chief exec of Intel Capital, which at the time was the largest private fund in the world, in my old job in Manchester, to sort of really trying to promote Manchester to him. And he said, look, I'm just going to stop you there. You could probably tell he had a thick Irish accent. I'm Irish, and pretty much any investment that I get hold is going straight back to Ireland. At which point I said, well, there's a lot of Irish people in Manchester, actually. So, but, it is very, very powerful. And certainly that West Coast, the Irish have done brilliantly around that. And I say the Scots are improving it. So there is real merit in it. I think at Post we sometimes do that more probably than we do from the centre here in the UK. And you'll see, and I think this is where there's opportunities to do things like St David's Day type activities, or around the rugby, or around some of those international cultural instances as well, because that tends to bring them together. But likewise working with the universities as well and their alumni, which is really, really strong, as well as people who are from Wales originally, those who have almost adopted Wales, if you like, as emotionally at least. So I do think it's very powerful. I think, as I say, my experience is most of those are driven from the place that they are representing, if you like. But I think as UK, we're aware of them and we try and utilise them where we can. But we're not necessarily driving them from the centre.
Can I as opposed to I'll commit to writing, I'm going to assess this myself. I'd like to see where this sits within government and how we can utilise. I think it's a really powerful idea. So I'll do some work on that and I'll write back to you if that's okay.
Thank you. That's very kind.
Brilliant, thank you very much, Ben. And can I thank both witnesses for attending this afternoon. Lord Stockwood, thank you very much for your time and attention, and obviously Tim Newns as well. It's really great to have you both in front of us. Thank you for that. We look forward to you writing back to us, and I'm sure we will prompt with some questions. But thank you very much for your time. I will now close this session. Order.